My name is Diana, and there was a time when I thought I had everything neatly arranged in my life. I had a successful career as the head of marketing, a loving husband named Bob, and a stable, comfortable existence. I was proud to be financially independent, diligently paying off our mortgage with my earnings. Family played a central role for us. Bob's younger brother, Nathan, and their mother, Judy, were constants in our lives. Their father had passed away some years before, leaving the brothers particularly protective of their mom. It was endearing to see, and it deepened my affection for Bob, watching how devotedly he cared for his family. Initially, Judy seemed quite fond of me. During family get-togethers, we would chat over coffee, and she often inquired about my job in marketing, nodding with what seemed like genuine respect as she remarked on the importance of my work. I cherished her approval and yearned to be an integral part of Bob's close-knit family circle. The early years of our marriage were filled with joyous family activities, weekend barbecues, holiday feasts, and spontaneous game nights. I remember one particularly lively Thanksgiving at Judy's house, where the air was filled with laughter and overlapping conversations. "Pass the gravy, will you?" Bob's uncle would jovially demand, to which Judy playfully retorted, yet always with a smile as she passed the gravy boat. I felt a true sense of belonging, surrounded by what had become my family too. However, a troubling undercurrent surfaced during a New Year's Eve celebration at Judy's. I was topping up my wine in the kitchen when I overheard her in the living room, snidely commenting on what another family member, Lori, was wearing. Lori, a single mother and cousin of Bob's, was struggling financially. Judy's words were cutting. "That dress must have cost all of $10, she scoffed, implying Lori was out of her depth trying to socialize with those who were more financially secure. My heart sank with embarrassment for Lori. This was not the warm, welcoming family I thought I knew. As time went on, the initial signs of teasing I had dismissed as harmless became increasingly apparent as cruelty. Judy frequently gathered with Bob and Nathan, whispering and snickering as they cast judgmental glances around the room at other relatives and friends, often bursting into suppressed laughter. One Easter Sunday, I reached my limit. Judy was dominating the conversation in the living room, her sons by her side as she made a derogatory remark about another relative's new car. "Probably got it from the buy here, pay here a lot. She'll be paying it off until she's 70, Judy speculated with a smirk. Compelled by a surge of protectiveness, I confronted her. "Hey," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "Don't you think that's a bit much? Janet can probably hear you." The room fell silent. Judy's gaze was piercing as she looked up at me with thinly veiled scorn. "Well," she retorted sarcastically, "looks like we've offended your delicate sensibilities, Diana." Bob and Nathan exchanged uneasy looks. "I just think it's rude," I continued, my voice firm despite my racing heart. "Why do you always have to put people down?" Judy's superficial smile faded. "If you don't like it, you don't have to listen. Why don't you go sit somewhere else?" Feeling as though I had been metaphorically slapped, I turned to Bob, hoping for his support. But Bob just looked down at the floor. "Fine," I said, my voice tight. "I will." From that day forward, family gatherings turned into a profoundly uncomfortable ordeal. I would sit by myself, nursing a drink, while Bob remained glued to his mother's side. Occasionally, he'd send me an apologetic glance, but he never came to sit with me. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. "Why don't you ever stand up to her?" I asked him. Bob sighed deeply, his hand running through his hair in distress. "She's my mother, Diana. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to tell her she's being mean. I want you to support me." But he never did. Gradually, I began to find any excuse to skip these family events, citing work emergencies, migraines, anything to avoid the icy stares and whispered criticisms. Just when I thought things couldn't get more strained, life threw me a curveball. I discovered I was pregnant. Holding the pregnancy test with its 2 pink lines staring back at me, I called for Bob, my voice quivering. He appeared at the bathroom door, concern etching his face. Wordlessly, I handed him the test. His eyes widened, and pulling me into an embrace for a moment, I felt that perhaps things could turn around. Maybe this baby would mend the growing rifts between us. But the pregnancy was difficult from the start. I suffered from constant nausea, dizziness, and the looming threat of miscarriage. My doctor prescribed bed rest, and as the weeks dragged on, my condition worsened. My eyesight began to deteriorate, a rare and potentially permanent complication, making it impossible to continue working. Quitting my job, I felt more isolated than ever and deeply needed Bob's presence. However, Bob seemed increasingly distant. He often came home late, blaming extra work or outings with colleagues, and more often than not, I fell asleep alone, the sound of the front door closing jarring me awake in the dead of night. When the day for my C-section arrived, my deteriorated eyesight meant that a natural birth was too risky. As I lay on the cold operating table, excitement and fear coursed through me. "Where's Bob?" I asked the nurse, my voice shaking. She gave me a sympathetic smile. "Your husband's in the waiting room, dear. He said he'd rather stay there." The surgery went smoothly, and soon the beautiful sound of my son's first cry filled the room. As they placed him on my chest, a rush of overwhelming love took my breath away. Later, in the recovery room, Bob finally appeared. His face was a mask of discomfort and annoyance. "Look, Diana, I've got to say something. This whole thing, it's not right," he said. I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" His frustration was palpable as he spoke. "Normal women give birth on their own without all this surgery crap. And men? We're not supposed to be here for this. We should be meeting our wives and kids at home like in the old days." His words struck me deeply. "Bob, I couldn't risk," but he cut me off. "Save it. I'm heading home. This place gives me the creeps." The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, with Bob rarely at home. Bob was often absent when he was home, and when he was around, he hardly contributed to caring for our son. Instead, he'd grumble irritably as our baby cried during the night. "Can't you quiet him down?" Exhausted, I'd reply, "I'm trying. He's teething, Bob. It's painful for him." Yet Bob's patience was thinning. "You're always focused on the kid. What about me? What about what I need?" His words stunned me. Here I was, barely managing minimal sleep, still healing from a significant surgery, and he was upset about our diminished intimacy. As the months passed, Bob's displeasure only deepened. One night, while I tried to calm our restless 7-month-old, Bob announced abruptly, "You need to start working again." Shocked, I faced him. "But what about the baby?" "We'll get a nanny," he interjected. "We can't go on like this, Diana. We're running out of money." I wanted to protest, to say our baby needed me, that I wasn't prepared to leave him yet, but the firm set of Bob's stopped me. Reluctantly, I started looking for jobs. With my vision still impaired, job hunting was daunting. I eventually found a role at a smaller firm where the salary was notably less than my previous job. When I shared this with Bob, he was dismissively unsupportive. "That's all? We're paying a nanny for this?" Frustration filled his words. Tears stung my eyes as I responded, "I'm doing all I can, Bob. It's challenging with my vision not fully recovered." He just muttered excuses under his breath and left the room. Thus began a grueling new chapter of my life. Mornings were a rush to get to work, each day leaving a pang of guilt as I handed my son over to the nanny. My days were a blur, struggling to keep up at work with compromised eyesight, and then returning to a home where resentment from my husband awaited, alongside a child who needed my love and care. Time seemed to slip by in a relentless cycle of work, childcare, and escalating tension at home. Family gatherings, already strained, were made worse by Judy's actions. She would grandstand as the affectionate grandmother when others were watching, yet her detachment was evident. She'd beckon our son with a sweet tone, "Come to Grandma," But he, sensing the coldness, would cling to me instead. Judy's mood would sour instantly. "What have you been telling him about me?" she'd accuse, venom in her voice. "You're turning my grandson against me." Exhausted, I would attempt to explain, "He just doesn't know you well, Judy. Maybe if you visited more." But she would cut me off. "Don't you dare blame this on me," and storm off to complain to Bob. On an unremarkable Tuesday, my life took another turn. I was holding a positive pregnancy test, the lines clear and unmistakable. Panic gripped me as I remembered the hardships of my first pregnancy. Was I strong enough to endure this again? Realizing I was already well into the first trimester, the path forward seemed chosen for me. Trembling, I called Bob at work to break the news. His impatient voice came through. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," I said. After a lengthy silence, he replied, "Look, Diana, I'm swamped. We'll talk later. Just keep your job. We can't lose that income." Then he hung up. Alone, with the phone still in my hand, I felt more isolated than ever. However, this pregnancy was less taxing than the first. My morning sickness was less severe, and my vision remained stable. With renewed determination, I continued working, focused on supporting my growing family amidst the challenges. As my pregnancy progressed and my belly grew, the emotional gap between Bob and me seemed to widen drastically. He spent increasing amounts of time at his mother's house, often returning home late into the night. One evening, as I struggled to put our toddler to bed while managing my discomfort, Bob walked in. "Hey," I greeted him, hopeful for some assistance. "Can you read him a story? I'm really tired." Bob glanced at us, then at his watch, and sighed. "Can't. I promised Mom I'd help her move some furniture. Don't wait up." The door shut behind him, and a tear rolled down my cheek. I looked down at my son, his big eyes trusting and unaware of my sorrow, and then at my belly, feeling a deep love for the child I had yet to meet. As my 7th month of pregnancy neared, Thanksgiving approached. Guests began to arrive in the afternoon. My parents were among the first, with my mom immediately donning an apron to assist in the kitchen. Friends and family filled our home, bringing with them a buzz of conversation and laughter. Just as I was setting the table for dinner, the doorbell rang again. It was Nathan, Bob's younger brother, and he wasn't alone. "Everyone, this is Victoria," Nathan beamed, introducing his fiancée. The room momentarily fell silent, then erupted in a chorus of congratulations. I forced a smile, trying not to dwell on the flicker of envy I felt, as I noticed how Bob's face brightened at his brother's happiness. Judy arrived shortly after, her eyes widening appreciatively as she took in Victoria. "Well," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with enthusiasm, "aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" Throughout the dinner, Judy doted on Victoria, peppering her with questions and hanging on her every word. I did my best to focus on being a gracious hostess, but couldn't ignore their conversation. "So, Victoria," Judy said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear, "Nathan tells me you're a manager at National Bank. How prestigious." Victoria nodded, slightly uncomfortable. "Yes, I've been there for about 4 years now." Judy beamed. "You must be doing very well for yourself. Unlike some people who can only pop out babies and breed poverty," she added, casting a pointed look my way. I felt my cheeks flush with humiliation. Beside me, my mother tensed, ready to defend me, but I gently touched her arm, silently pleading with her not to escalate the situation. Judy's voice oozed faux sweetness as she continued. "Victoria here makes $120,000 a month. Now that's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always dreamed of. Smart, beautiful, successful." Tears welled up in my eyes as I remembered the years I had spent supporting our family, paying the mortgage, and building a career I was proud of, all now seemingly forgotten. "I think we should continue this lovely evening somewhere more suitable," Judy announced, standing. "Victoria, dear, why don't we all go to that new restaurant downtown? My treat, of course." Before I could grasp what was happening, Judy, Bob, Nathan, and Victoria were heading out the door. Bob didn't even look back at me as they left. The remaining guests, feeling the shift in the atmosphere, soon made their excuses and departed, leaving only my parents behind. They offered to help clean up, but I insisted they rest too. Finally, by myself, I collapsed onto the sofa, letting the tears come unchecked. Time slipped by while I cried, my hand lying gently on my swollen belly, lost in thoughts about how my life had come to this. Dawn was approaching. 5 days after my emergency C-section, I felt an unexpected surge of strength, both physically and emotionally. The doctors were impressed with my progress and gave me the go-ahead to leave the hospital. During this time, Bob hadn't called once since he'd left for San Diego. He hadn't asked about my well-being or inquired about his newborn son. It was clear to me then that our marriage had reached its end. I reached out to my parents asking if the boys and I could stay with them temporarily. They immediately agreed and supported my decision. While staying with them, I had the chance to rest and recuperate as they doted on my sons. I began to research divorce lawyers and started gathering all necessary financial documents. A week after leaving the hospital, Bob finally called. I ignored the first 3 calls, letting them go to voicemail before answering the third. "Where the hell are you? Why aren't you at home?" Bob demanded, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. Taking a deep breath, I replied, "I'm at my parents' house with our sons. I've filed for divorce." There was a stunned silence, then he laughed derisively. "Divorce? Are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you?" "What you've done?" I retorted, feeling a rush of anger. "You mean like abandoning me right before I gave birth? Or draining our savings?" "Oh, get over it," he scoffed. "I'll pay you back, no problem. In fact, I don't even want to see you again. Do you know why? Because I'm going to be rich." He ranted about how Nathan's new wife had offered him a position at the bank, about their plans to start a financial company, and how they were going to become incredibly wealthy. "You never believed in me, Diana. You always shot down my ideas. Well, guess what? I'm free now, and you're just a loser who can't recognize potential when it's right in front of her." The divorce proceedings were surprisingly quick. Bob didn't contest anything, returned the money he had taken, and agreed to pay alimony. When it came to the house, I had years of mortgage payments logged that proved I had been the main contributor. The judge awarded me the house without hesitation. The day I moved back into what was now my house with the boys, Bob was there, packing up his last belongings. As I entered, holding the baby and with our toddler by my hand, he sneered, "Enjoy this dump while you can. I'll be in a mansion soon, swimming in cash. You'll see what you missed." He left, and with his departure, I felt a tremendous relief. The house felt more spacious and brighter. A year and a half later, life had settled into a new routine. I had returned to work and found a balance between my career and motherhood. Though it wasn't always easy, my boys and I were happy, healthy, and thriving. One ordinary Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a news alert that made my jaw drop. The headline read, "Local banker exposed as fraud, leaves family in ruins." The article detailed a shocking scandal. Victoria, Nathan's wife, had been orchestrating an elaborate con. She had convinced Bob, Nathan, and Judy to invest heavily in a non-existent financial company, leading them to mortgage Judy's house and drain all their savings into this phantom venture. Victoria had never actually been a banker. The office she showed them was just a short-term rental, a mere stage for her complex fraud. She vanished with millions, leaving behind nothing but counterfeit documents and shattered dreams. To make things even worse, it turned out that an extra loan had been taken to cover Nathan and Victoria's extravagant wedding in San Diego, the same event that had caused Bob to leave us. As I continued reading, a whirlwind of emotions hit me. Shock, confusion, and I must admit a hint of satisfaction. The aftermath was devastating. Unable to repay the debts, they lost everything. Their home, cars, and even personal possessions, all taken by creditors. Now penniless, I heard from others that Judy had resorted to a cashier job just to scrape by enough for a small apartment and basic groceries. Bob and Nathan were in similar dire straits, their dreams of affluence ruined. I felt a deep sense of relief that I had divorced Bob when I did, sparing my children and myself from the financial ruin that engulfed my former in-laws. Just when I thought I had moved past all this, Judy's number appeared on my phone. Against my better judgment, I answered. Judy's voice was weak, a stark contrast to her usual commanding presence. "We need your help," she began, pleading for a place to stay. "The children need their father and grandmother," she urged, emphasizing the importance of family in these hard times. I took a deep breath, flooded with memories of past betrayals and hardships, Thanksgiving alone, being abandoned before giving birth, the repeated insults. "Family?" I echoed, my voice firm. "You weren't concerned about family when you left me alone, pregnant and in peril. You weren't worried about family when you drained my savings or when you called me a loser." Judy tried to interject, but I stopped her. "I'm sorry for your troubles, Judy, but the choices made by you, Bob, and Nathan are not my burden. My children are my priority, and I refuse to let your chaos disrupt our lives. Please don't contact us again." I hung up and blocked her number, feeling a significant weight lift from my shoulders. It was over, once and for all.